there's something happening right now that you might not even realize. The fact that you're watching this video at this exact moment isn't coincidence. It's not random chance that brought you here, and it's not simply because you were scrolling through your feed looking for something to watch. Something deeper is at work, something that operates beyond the mechanics of recommendation algorithms and digital patterns. You've arrived here because you're ready for what you're about to hear. Think about the last time you discovered something that completely shifted your perspective. Maybe it was a book that seemed to appear in your life exactly when you needed it, or a conversation with a stranger that answered questions you didn't even know you were asking. Perhaps it was a moment of clarity that came during a difficult period, offering insight that wouldn't have made sense to you even a few months earlier. These weren't accidents. They were appointments, scheduled by an intelligence that operates far beyond our everyday understanding. The universe has a way of delivering information precisely when we're equipped to receive it. Not a moment before, when we dismiss it as nonsense or fail to grasp its significance, and not a moment after, when the window of optimal learning has passed. This timing isn't controlled by any external force manipulating events around us. Instead, it emerges from the relationship between our evolving consciousness and the information field that surrounds us constantly. Right now, before we go any deeper into this rabbit hole, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me about a time when the perfect information appeared in your life at exactly the right moment. Because what we're about to explore will make you see those experiences in an entirely new light. Consider how knowledge itself seems to have layers of accessibility. You can read the same book at different stages of your life and extract completely different meanings from identical words. The text hasn't changed, but your capacity to perceive and integrate its deeper levels has evolved. This isn't simply about gaining more life experience or accumulating facts. It's about developing the internal architecture necessary to support more complex understandings. When you were 5 years old, you couldn't comprehend the emotional complexity of adult relationships, not because you lacked intelligence, but because you hadn't developed the emotional and psychological frameworks needed to process that information meaningfully. The same principle applies to spiritual and philosophical insights. They exist in a kind of locked state until we develop the perceptual tools necessary to unlock them. This creates what we might call a consciousness filter. Information that would overwhelm, confuse, or simply bounce off an unprepared mind gets naturally screened out. It's not that the information isn't available, it's that we literally cannot see it, hear it, or understand it until we've reached the appropriate level of development. The universe appears to operate with built-in protection mechanisms that ensure we encounter knowledge in digestible portions, precisely calibrated to our current capacity for integration. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't a passive process where we simply wait for readiness to dawn upon us. We're active participants in preparing ourselves for higher levels of understanding. Every book we read, every conversation we have, every moment of self-reflection contributes to building the foundation for future insights. We're constantly under construction, upgrading our perceptual software to handle more sophisticated downloads of understanding. The people who seem to stumble upon profound insights with unusual frequency aren't necessarily more gifted or spiritually advanced. They've learned to recognize the signs that indicate when they're approaching a new threshold of understanding. They've developed sensitivity to the subtle cues that suggest their consciousness is ready for an upgrade. More importantly, they've learned to actively participate in their own preparation process. This participation doesn't mean forcing insights or trying to rush the natural timing of revelation. That approach typically backfires, creating resistance that actually delays the very understanding we're seeking. Instead, it means cultivating the conditions that make profound insights more likely to emerge. It means developing practices and perspectives that keep us receptive to information that operates beyond our current level of comprehension. Think of consciousness as having bandwidth limitations, similar to internet connections. When we're operating at lower bandwidths of awareness, we can only download basic information. Simple cause and effect relationships, linear thinking patterns, surface-level emotional responses. But as our bandwidth expands through various forms of development, we become capable of downloading more complex, multidimensional information simultaneously. The expansion of consciousness bandwidth doesn't happen uniformly across all areas of understanding. You might develop sophisticated insights about human psychology while remaining relatively undeveloped in areas of spiritual metaphysics. or vice versa. This creates a unique pattern of readiness for each individual, explaining why different people resonate with different types of information at different times in their lives. This bandwidth expansion also explains why certain teachings or insights can seem obvious or even elementary once we've integrated them, while they appeared completely incomprehensible just months or years earlier. The information hasn't simplified. Our capacity to process it has grown. What once required our full attention and careful study now operates as background knowledge, freeing up processing power for even more complex understandings. The universe seems to operate as a vast educational system, presenting curriculum appropriate to each student's current level of development. But unlike traditional educational systems, this cosmic curriculum adapts in real time to our evolving capacity. It presents challenges and insights precisely calibrated to stretch our understanding without overwhelming our ability to integrate new information. This adaptive quality suggests something remarkable about the relationship between individual consciousness and the larger intelligence that governs information flow. It's as if reality itself is responsive to our readiness levels, revealing more of its nature as we develop the capacity to comprehend and work with increasingly subtle aspects of existence. The universe doesn't just contain information, it actively participates in our education process. But this raises profound questions about the nature of reality itself. If information becomes accessible based on our readiness to receive it, what does this tell us about the fundamental structure of existence? Are we discovering objective truths that exist independently of our consciousness, or are we participating in the creation of reality through our evolving capacity to perceive it? The answer to this question has implications that extend far beyond academic philosophy. The implications reach deeper than most people are comfortable acknowledging. What if consciousness isn't just a passive receiver of information, but an active participant in determining what information becomes available? This isn't just philosophical speculation anymore. Quantum physics has been grappling with the observer effect for decades, the phenomenon where the act of observation appears to influence the behavior of subatomic particles. But what we're discussing extends this principle far beyond the laboratory into the realm of everyday experience and spiritual understanding. When you develop the capacity to perceive a new layer of reality, you're not simply becoming aware of something that was always there waiting to be discovered. Your expanded awareness actually contributes to bringing that aspect of reality into manifestation. This suggests a universe that operates more like a collaborative, creative project than a fixed structure containing predetermined information waiting to be uncovered by sufficiently advanced observers. Consider how this plays out in practical terms. Before you understood the concept of psychological projection, you couldn't see it operating in your relationships or recognize it in others. The phenomenon existed, but it remained invisible to you. However, once you developed the framework to recognize projection, you began seeing it everywhere. Your new awareness didn't just reveal existing instances of projection, it actually increased the likelihood of encountering situations where projection becomes visible and workable. This happens because consciousness operates as both a receiving mechanism and a transmission device. When you develop a new capacity for understanding, you begin broadcasting a different quality of awareness that draws experiences aligned with that understanding into your reality. People who can perceive projection start attracting relationships and situations where projection becomes a central theme, not by coincidence, but because their expanded awareness creates a field that magnetizes relevant experiences. The same principle applies to spiritual insights. Someone who develops sensitivity to synchronicity begins experiencing more synchronistic events. A person who cultivates awareness of energy fields starts noticing subtle energetic interactions that were previously invisible. Their expanded consciousness doesn't just perceive these phenomena more clearly, it actually increases the frequency and intensity of such experiences in their reality. This creates what we might call consciousness loops. The more aware you become of certain aspects of reality, the more those aspects show up in your experience, which further develops your awareness, which attracts even more sophisticated manifestations of those phenomena. These loops can accelerate the development of understanding in ways that seem almost magical to outside observers. But here's where personal responsibility enters the equation in a profound way. If consciousness participates in creating the reality it experiences, then the quality of our awareness directly influences the quality of information and experiences that become available to us. This means we're not just passive recipients of cosmic education, we're co-creators of our own curriculum. This co-creative aspect explains why two people can be exposed to identical information or experiences and extract completely different levels of meaning and insight. Their consciousness is literally creating different realities from the same raw material. The person operating from fear-based awareness will generate fear-based interpretations and attract fear-confirming experiences. The person operating from love-based awareness will create love-based meanings and magnetize love-affirming situations. The universe appears to be infinitely responsive to the quality of consciousness we bring to our experience. This responsiveness operates through mechanisms that are subtle enough to maintain the illusion of objective reality, while being powerful enough to create dramatically different life experiences for people operating from different levels of awareness. This understanding transforms how we approach personal and spiritual development. Instead of trying to acquire more information or accumulate spiritual experiences, the focus shifts toward cultivating the quality of consciousness that naturally attracts the insights and experiences most aligned with our highest potential. We become gardeners of awareness rather than hunters of knowledge. The cultivation process involves developing what ancient traditions called discernment, the ability to distinguish between information that serves our evolution and information that keeps us stuck in limiting patterns. Not all information is created equal. Some information expands consciousness, while other information contracts it. Some insights liberate, while others create new forms of spiritual materialism and ego enhancement. True discernment develops through direct experience rather than intellectual analysis. You learn to sense how different types of information affect your state of consciousness. Information that serves your evolution typically produces a quality of expansion, clarity, and peace, even when it challenges your existing beliefs. Information that doesn't serve your evolution often creates contraction, confusion, or agitation, even when it flatters your ego or confirms what you want to believe. This experiential approach to discernment helps explain why the same teaching can be profoundly transformative for one person while leaving another completely unaffected. The teaching itself isn't inherently powerful or powerless. Its effectiveness depends on the resonance between the information and the receiver's current state of consciousness development. The resonance principle also explains why trying to force insights or rush spiritual development typically backfires. When we push against the natural timing of our development, we create resistance that actually blocks the very understanding we're seeking. This resistance manifests as spiritual striving, the exhausting effort to achieve states of consciousness or acquire insights that we're not yet ready to integrate sustainably. Spiritual striving often masquerades as dedication or commitment, but it operates from the assumption that we need to become something other than what we are in order to access higher understanding. This assumption creates a fundamental split between who we think we are and who we think we need to become, generating internal conflict that interferes with the natural flow of insight and realization. The alternative to striving involves learning to work with the natural rhythms of consciousness development. This means developing sensitivity to the difference between appropriate effort and counterproductive forcing. Appropriate effort feels sustainable and energizing, like swimming with a current rather than against it. Counterproductive forcing feels effortful and draining, like trying to push water uphill. Working with natural rhythms requires developing trust in the intelligence that governs consciousness evolution. This intelligence operates through what we might call divine timing, presenting challenges and opportunities precisely when we're ready to work with them productively. Divine timing often differs significantly from ego timing, which wants everything to happen according to personal preferences and timelines. The tension between ego timing and divine timing creates one of the most significant challenges in spiritual development. The ego wants to control the process, to determine which insights to receive and when to receive them. But consciousness evolution operates according to principles that transcend ego preferences, following patterns that serve our highest development rather than our immediate desires. Learning to align with divine timing involves developing what traditions call surrender, but not the passive resignation that word often implies. True surrender is an active collaboration with the intelligence that guides consciousness evolution. It means participating fully in our development while releasing attachment to specific outcomes or timelines. This collaborative approach creates space for insights and experiences that exceed what we could have imagined or planned for ourselves. When we stop trying to control our spiritual development and start learning to dance with it, we often discover that the universe has far more interesting and effective plans for our evolution than anything our limited perspective could have conceived. This collaborative dance with consciousness evolution raises the crucial question of how to recognize when you're approaching readiness for new levels of understanding. The signs aren't always obvious, and they rarely match our expectations of what spiritual development should look like. Often, the most significant breakthroughs occur during periods that feel like stagnation or even regression. When our familiar ways of understanding the world are breaking down faster than new insights are emerging to replace them. One of the most reliable indicators of approaching readiness is the emergence of productive dissatisfaction with your current level of understanding. This isn't the restless frustration that drives spiritual materialism, constantly seeking new experiences or teachers to fill an inner void. Instead, it's a deeper recognition that your existing frameworks for making sense of reality have become too small to contain your expanding awareness. This productive dissatisfaction often manifests as a growing sensitivity to the limitations of dualistic thinking. You begin noticing how your habitual patterns of categorizing experiences into good and bad, right and wrong, spiritual and mundane, create artificial separations that don't reflect the interconnected nature of reality. This recognition doesn't come from intellectual analysis, but from direct experience of how these mental categories actually limit your ability to respond to life with wisdom and compassion. Another sign of approaching readiness is the spontaneous dissolution of beliefs and concepts that once provided security and identity. This dissolution process can feel disorienting or even frightening, especially when it involves core beliefs about yourself, your purpose, or the nature of reality. The ego interprets this dissolution as a threat, generating resistance and attempts to rebuild familiar conceptual structures. But for consciousness evolution, this dissolution creates the spaciousness necessary for new understanding to emerge. The dissolution process often coincides with what mystics call dark nights of the soul, periods when traditional sources of meaning and motivation lose their compelling power. These dark nights aren't obstacles to spiritual development. They're actually indicators that consciousness is preparing to reorganize itself at a higher level of integration. The temporary loss of familiar reference points creates the conditions necessary for genuine transformation rather than mere modification of existing patterns. During these transitional periods, you might notice an increased sensitivity to the quality of information and experiences you allow into your awareness. Things that once seemed interesting or important now feel hollow or even toxic. Conversations that used to engage you now feel draining or superficial. Entertainment that used to provide satisfaction now seems like a waste of precious life energy. This isn't spiritual superiority or judgment. It's your consciousness naturally upgrading its filtration system. Simultaneously, you might find yourself drawn to information, practices, or experiences that would have seemed irrelevant or incomprehensible just months earlier. A book that you couldn't get through before suddenly becomes riveting and meaningful. Meditation practices that felt forced or artificial now feel natural and necessary. Conversations about consciousness and meaning that once seemed abstract now feel vitally important and practical. These shifts in attraction and aversion reflect changes in your consciousness bandwidth that make new types of information accessible while making outdated information feel increasingly irrelevant. It's like upgrading from a basic television to high definition. You can still watch the same channels, but many programs that seemed acceptable before now appear obviously low quality and unsatisfying. The readiness for new understanding also manifests through changes in your relationship with uncertainty and not knowing. Instead of experiencing uncertainty as anxiety-provoking, you begin recognizing not knowing as a fertile space where new insights can emerge. This shift represents a fundamental change in how consciousness relates to knowledge itself, moving from the need to have answers to the capacity to rest comfortably in questions. This comfort with uncertainty allows for what Zen traditions call beginner's mind, the ability to approach even familiar experiences with fresh perception. Beginner's mind creates the conditions for insight by preventing habitual mental patterns from automatically categorizing and filing away new information before its deeper significance can be recognized. When you can maintain beginner's mind, ordinary experiences become doorways to extraordinary understanding. Another crucial indicator of readiness is the development of what we might call energetic discernment, the ability to sense the quality of consciousness behind words, actions, and situations. This discernment operates below the level of mental analysis, providing immediate information about whether something serves your evolution or keeps you stuck in limiting patterns. People operating with developed energetic discernment can sense the difference between genuine wisdom and spiritual entertainment, between authentic presence and performed spirituality. This energetic sensitivity also extends to your relationship with teachers, teachings, and spiritual communities. Instead of being impressed by external credentials or charismatic personalities, you begin evaluating spiritual information based on its actual effect on your state of consciousness. Teachers and teachings that genuinely serve your evolution produce a quality of expansion and clarity, while those that don't serve your development often create subtle contraction or confusion, regardless of how sophisticated they appear intellectually. The development of energetic discernment naturally leads to what traditions call self-reliance, but not the ego's version of independence that rejects all external guidance. True self-reliance involves learning to access your own inner guidance system while remaining open to external information that resonates with your deepest knowing. You become your own final authority while maintaining humility about the limitations of your current perspective. This balance between inner authority and outer openness creates the optimal conditions for continued evolution. You're no longer dependent on external sources to tell you what's true or important, but you haven't closed yourself off from information that could expand your understanding. This balance allows you to participate in your own education process as a conscious collaborator rather than a passive recipient. Perhaps the most profound sign of readiness is the recognition that your individual development serves something larger than personal advancement. You begin sensing how your evolution contributes to the consciousness development of your family, community, and species. This recognition doesn't come from grandiose thinking about your importance, but from direct experience of how changes in your awareness ripple out to affect everyone around you. This understanding transforms spiritual development from a personal project into a form of service. You realize that becoming more conscious isn't just about improving your own life experience. It's about contributing to the collective awakening of humanity. This shift in motivation provides sustainable energy for continued development while preventing spiritual narcissism and ego inflation. The fact that you've stayed with this exploration until this point suggests that you're already recognizing some of these signs in your own experience. The universe doesn't waste energy delivering information to consciousness that isn't ready to receive it. Your willingness to engage with these concepts indicates that your awareness is preparing for or already undergoing significant expansion. The question isn't whether you're ready for new understanding. The question is how consciously you'll participate in the process. Will you resist the dissolution of outdated beliefs and cling to familiar limitations? Or will you learn to dance with the intelligence that guides consciousness evolution? Will you try to control your development according to ego preferences? Or will you discover the joy of collaborating with forces that have access to possibilities beyond your current imagination? The choice is always yours, and it's always being made in this present moment. The universe is endlessly patient, endlessly creative, and endlessly committed to your evolution. It will continue presenting opportunities for awakening until you're ready to embrace them fully. And when you are ready, when you're truly ready, the understanding you receive will exceed anything you could have conceived or requested. So here's my question for you. Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if this resonated with you. What signs of readiness are you recognizing in your own life right now? What familiar beliefs or patterns are you feeling called to release? And what new possibilities are beginning to emerge at the edges of your awareness? Your recognition of these signs isn't just personal insight. It's information that can help others recognize their own readiness for the next level of understanding. The universe knows you're ready. The question is, do you?